Hi everyone. In this video I want to say a few words about Things Fall Apart and try to answer the question, why are we reading Things Fall Apart? It's a good question and I hope you're asking it. There are a few words that I will use and which you should probably be aware of. I do want to say a few words about colonialism, about representations of Africa, post-colonialism, a few words about the IB. These words, seminal or foundational, these are similar words, and what it means to deconstruct a text. So the question is, why are we reading Things Fall Apart? And the real answer is because within the IB, you are expected to get some variety, and you're supposed to be exposed to a variety of the many different literatures of the world. And you will remember our little video clip where you watched Hitler get his 1 in higher level IB mathematics. And of course, that video clip, I asked you, what is it? And some of you said, what do you mean, what is it? I mean, literally, what is it? It's a video clip. It's a spoof or a satire or a parody. I would probably call it a parody. The makers of that video clip, or that meme, perhaps you could say, were poking fun of the IB and of the experience of being an IB student and all the things you have to read and to calculate, and everything from logarithms to Salman Rushdie and Virginia Woolf and Wole Soyinka. And you will remember that this satire, this parody, Hitler mentioned the agony of having to study Salman Rushdie, Virginia Woolf, Wole Soyinka, and then having to watch 5 versions of Hamlet, 5 movie versions of Hamlet. And you know, he's describing an IB English student's experience, and the IB wants you to have a variety of literature, including different literary forms. So Shakespeare was both a playwright and a poet, and Hamlet, of course, was a play. Wole Soyinka, also a playwright and a poet. Virginia Woolf, a novelist. Salman Rushdie, a novelist. Coming from different parts of the world. You can see there India, England, and Nigeria, and England again, and coming from different centuries. So Shakespeare wrote around 1600. The others are 20th century authors, although Salman Rushdie and Wole Soyinka are still alive, so their career stretched into the 21st century, but Virginia Woolf came significantly earlier. So the IB wants you to have this variety of literature. So a good place to start would be with African literature, especially because most of you won't have much exposure to African literature. And there's a great body of work out there, and it's very interesting. And Things Fall Apart is a seminal or a foundational. Seminal means it gave seed to. Foundational means it laid a foundation for. A seminal or a foundational work of literature that helped to create this bigger body of literature called post-colonial literature. Now, what exactly is that? It's a difficult term to define, but it involves all the literature that came from the countries that were formerly colonized, that had experienced and suffered through colonialism, and wanted to express themselves and describe their cultures and tell their stories after colonialism crumbled. So that would include, of course, India, which won its independence in 1947, and many African countries which won their independence in the 1950s or the 1960s. So, you know, just a few words about Africa and colonialism. First of all, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is an African novel, that it is. It's also a Nigerian novel, and it is also an Igbo novel. And Igbo are the people who live in southeastern Nigeria. So there you see on the map of Africa, you might ask, what are all those lines? Those are some very unnatural lines which have created the countries that we currently have in Africa. I think there are about 56 of them. Nigeria there is one of the biggest, most populous, most powerful, most culturally significant in terms of its impact on the rest of the world, and one of the wealthiest countries in Africa. Nigeria itself has, I think, more than 100 different peoples or ethnicities that are officially recognized. However, the three biggest ones are the Hausa and Fulani, who are mostly Muslims that live in the north, and then the Yoruba, who live in the southwest there in red. That should be Y-O-R-U-B-A. And then the Igbo, who live in the southeast, and that's the Niger River Delta that you see there. And the Igbo people are largely Christian, whereas the Hausa and Fulani are largely Muslims, almost exclusively Muslims, and the Yoruba are a different set of religions, including many traditional African beliefs, but they also have bits of Islam and Christianity mixed in. So the Igbo people are the people from which Chinua Achebe comes from, and this is very much an Igbo story. So some people have pointed out, quite correctly I think, this is not just an African story describing all of Africa. It is an African story, but it's not describing all of Africa. It's describing the Igbo people and their culture. So what are those lines? The countries of Africa. It's important to understand that during colonialism, the European colonialists divided up Africa along those lines. And all of that happened at the Berlin Conference. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's not a history lesson, but here you have a picture of the Berlin Conference from a contemporary newspaper in Berlin, 1884, 1885. And you won't see a single African in the room, but these European powers were dividing up Africa like it was a piece of pie. You take this piece, I'll take that piece. And that's what eventually gave us all these countries. You can see that in the blue, those were the French countries, the pink were the British or English countries, but everybody, Portugal is there, Italy is there, Spain is there, etc. There are a few countries which were never colonized, including Liberia and Ethiopia or Abyssinia. So Africa was divided up by these colonial powers, and this had a terrible impact on Africa. And after African nations won their freedom, there was a lot of discussion, a lot of arts, a lot of creativity, which made the world more aware of Africa and better aware of Africa. And one of the most important pieces of human creativity within that sort of mushrooming of African culture of the 1950s was Chinua Achebe's novel Things Fall Apart. So that's one of the reasons it's called post-colonial literature. And of course, there's a particular interest to Indians as well. And I do want to make the point that we have some very good Indian professors that have spoken and are available on YouTube about Things Fall Apart and about post-colonial literature. I'll point out three of them. They've all given excellent lectures. One of them is Professor Sayan. He has a whole course that's available on post-colonial literature. We won't take any time listening to him right now because Dr. Sayan is going to come visit our class next Thursday online. So that's going to be very exciting to have him in a webinar. He's got this very well constructed and reasonably argued series of lectures on post-colonial literature, and it's well worth looking at part of it. As you can see there, he's got 2 or 3 lectures on Things Fall Apart. Next, we've got this professor. His name is, there he is in the yellow shirt there. His name is T. Vijay Kumar. He's from Osmania University in Hyderabad. And he's got some really interesting things to say about Things Fall Apart. Let's listen to him for about 1 minute here, 1 or 2 minutes.
Of the number of copies it sold or the number of languages into which it has been translated. More important differently, Things Fall Apart is a foundational text. What I mean by that is that it is a novel which laid the foundation for African writing to be recognized globally, and a kind of a beginning of a tradition of African writing in English. And the importance of Things Fall Apart as a text is not just because it's a wonderful story, and not just because Achebe is a great storyteller and a master craftsman, but the real significance of Things Fall Apart as a novel can be understood if we read the novel against the background and in the larger context of the way in which Africa has been represented in European writing. For example, if I say Africa, just think about 5 images that come to your mind, and then sit down and see if any of those images is a positive image of Africa. The first thing that comes to our mind when we say Africa is that it is a dark continent, poverty-ridden, savage people, barbarians, right, cannibals.
Well, that's an interesting perspective, and I didn't really expect that when I first watched this video. It's certainly not the image that I have of Africa, but I would certainly want to know what you guys think. But I think it's a very important idea, because Chinua Achebe himself was very outspoken on this was the way that Europeans had represented Africa before he wrote his novel, or well into the 1950s. And he, of course, used Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad as an example, that Africans were portrayed as savages, as cannibals, as uneducated, etc. And that one of the reasons he was writing the novel is to tell the story of Africans from an African perspective. And I don't have that image of Africa. It's not certainly one of the first things that pops in my mind, but maybe that's because of my personal experiences. I really would like you to try his thought experiment and just close your eyes, think about Africa, write down the first 5 words that come to your mind, and I'd be interested to know what, as young people growing up in India in 2020, you think. I mean, anyway, that's Professor T. Vijay Kumar. He's got some good lectures. And I'm going to bring up one more professor. She's really interesting as well. She breaks things down. I'm afraid I don't know her name, but she breaks her things down kind of more simply and really focuses on the story itself and how to understand the story. And I like the way she interacts with her students, etc. I think she's worth having a look at. Let's just watch her for a minute or two.
So you now know the names of 2 settlements. The first is called Umofia. The second is called Mabanta. Now you have one of the powerful leaders in which place? Umofia. In part 1 of the novel, we are going to look at the first clan, or what is called the first Igbo community in Umofia. And here you have Okonkwo, who is a very powerful leader. Now how does he become a powerful leader? We must understand the life of Okonkwo. He had a father, and the name of the father is Unoka, U-N-O-K-A. So you have character number 1, Okonkwo. Then you have his father, Unoka. The third character is the eldest son of Okonkwo, and his name is Noi. The spelling is a little unusual, but I am sure you will be able to remember the spelling and also pronounce it. N-W-O-Y-E. You have Noi. Then you have a 4th important character. He is a 14-year-old boy, and his name is Ikemifuna. Ikemifuna. I-K-E-M-E-F-U-N-A. Ikemifuna is the 4th major character in the novel. Can we repeat the other 3, please?
Okay, and there you have it. I just wanted you to know that we have some excellent resources available, including some lectures from some Indian professors, and you can begin to see what a profound impact this novel had on the world. The fact that it's being so widely studied, not only at Western universities, but of course within Africa and within India and around the world. The last thing I'll say is I really like the way that professor focused on the characters and just getting you to understand things like the clans, the places, the characters, etc. And don't forget that I am kind of expecting you to draw up your own character map. However you like to do it, you can sort of borrow some from online, but I would like you to make your own. You can see mine is under construction, and I'll remind you once again, if you do want to put into your character maps some personifications of things that are not really characters, such as the evil forest or the boats on which the Christian missionaries arrived, you can do that too. So I don't want to go on any longer. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in class. Remember, if you want to learn more, those three professors really have some good lectures available.